Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Today we are continuing the First Crusade, and what we left off, of course, was the Battle of Dorylaeum, where we saw the Seljuk Turks tuck their tail and run, and they got pretty much beat out a lot. There was a ton of territory that's already taken by the Byzantium Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire. And now we saw Dorylaeum, which was a opportunistic time for the Seljuks to really massacre them, and it didn't work out that way. So now we're going to continue with the Siege of Antioch, which was the next stepping stone for the Crusaders. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. We love the history, and I hope you do too. Let's jump into it.
Took place in mid-July, with temperatures reaching over 30 degrees Celsius. There were no major rivers, and to make matters worse, Kilij Arslan adopted a scorched earth policy, stripping the land of any supplies and burning down useful structures. A week into this tumultuous path, a stream was found, and thousands sprinted towards it. Many drank too much and suffocated, while others were trampled.
Dang! This is the aftermath of the Battle of Dorylaeum. It seems like it looks like King, but it's Kilij. It seems like Kilij Arslan, has adopted the scorched earth mentality, which is to try to leave the Crusaders without any resources, to have to also tuck their tails and go back to Constantinople. But it's not the case so far.
The first major casualty of this expedition were the horses, a symbol of status and one of the greatest strengths of the Latin army. Western horses were larger than their eastern counterparts, and demanded between 30 to 40 liters of water per day.
That's a lot to keep up with. And remember, there's a lot of pilgrims around them as well. So many mouths to feed. There's probably, more casualties than even are spoken about, just because the pilgrims, the children, the women.
Thousands of pack animals and hunting dogs also died, which meant that the pace at which the army could move was further slowed down. This was the sacrifice the army had to make, according to the Roman High Command, which decided to take the southern route instead of the usual one through Ankara, without even stopping at Amorium.
Sicilian Armenia, that's an interesting one.
The risky move tricked the Seljuks into thinking that the army was not heading towards Antioch, and would divert back to the coast at any moment.
I know I'm pausing a lot, I'm just seeing so much and I'm questioning everything. It says Antioch in Pisidia, and then Antioch. That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, obviously we know which one's the real Antioch, but just interesting.
Coupled with their recent victory, this meant that the Crusaders were unopposed and didn't have to worry about ambushes and hit-and-run tactics. By August, the coalition made it to Antioch in Pisidia and resupplied, but by this point, thousands of soldiers perished. The horses, mules, hunting dogs and falcons were lost, and two of the major leaders were on the brink of death. Rimor was severely ill and didn't expect to recover, while Godfrey was badly mauled by a bear in a recent hunt.
What? That's insane.
The next stop was Iconium, a formidable but abandoned fortress, in which the army was warmly welcomed by its Roman population. At Heraclea, there was finally a hint of resistance, as the Turkic riders set an ambush, but after a short skirmish they fled the battle. The impact of Dorylaeum was so severe that nobody dared to stand against the knights for long. Instead of making for Cilicia, the army moved north towards Caesarea, then took a month crossing the Taurus Mountains, where the temperatures would drop severely, testing the constitution of the Franks, who were used to a very different climate. The roads were so steep that many knights decided to sell their weapons and armor. Whether this was a good plan or not, it solidifies the idea that even at this point, the shots were called by Alexios and his generals. As the troops advanced, Tatikios and his men rushed forward and liberated any strongholds, urging the citizens to ready their goods for the oncoming Crusaders and not to stir any trouble. In the absence of Seljuk authority, Roman and Armenian governors shifted their allegiance towards Constantinople.
They just go with the wind at this point, but I mean, that's a lot of people, but it seems that they are encircling what used to be the Sultanate of Rome. Kilij Arslan is just moving through these vassal states at this point, trying to rectify some sort of solution to this crusade.
A step which was essential in case the Siege of Antioch was prolonged and supplies were needed to support it. In November 1097, Anselm of Ribemont writes that the army held 200 fortresses and cities, while Stefan of Blois' account mentions 165. It is safe to assume that most of Anatolia was reconquered for the Komnenian dynasty. During the summer of 1097, the Seljuk scorched earth policy, coupled with the difficult terrain, stripped the Westerners from their most powerful tool, their heavy war mounts. Some fell from cliffs, and others perished from lack of water, forcing many knights to ride oxen, mules, or simply travel on foot, while goats, sheep, and dogs were used as pack animals. Soldiers were so dehydrated that on the rare occasion that water sources were found, many suffocated themselves as they drank too much. After arriving at Heraclea, the army divided into two. The bulk of the forces took the longer route north through Cappadocia and then east, circling the formidable Antitaurus, while a smaller contingent took the direct approach via the Cilician gates. This strategy resulted from careful and cunning planning on behalf of Alexios, who wanted to ensure a base of operations which could be used for supplies and later reinforcement, but also provides us with an idea of how well disciplined and coordinated the Council of Princes really was. The expedition in Cilicia was commanded by Baldwin of Boulogne and Tancred, the supporting side characters of their more renowned relatives Godfrey and Bohemond, who now had the opportunity to prove their worth. Tancred led no more than 200 men, but was accompanied by an Armenian guide, allowing him to arrive at Tarsus before Baldwin, who had between 300 and 500 troops. What used to be the capital of the region and the place where Mark Antony first met Cleopatra.
That's right. That's right. A stone archway, Cleopatra's Gate, still stands. I'm wondering if it still stands today, or it probably still stands then, because this is 1,000 years later. So it's probably then. So it still stands, commemorating her majestic arrival. But even this was built after the event as a tourist attraction. That makes sense. In the 2nd century, our local Turks have given it the less reverential nickname of the bitches. Wow.
Was now a meager town, which lost its port to centuries of sedimentation.
Oh, that used to be a port city. That's insane.
On September 21st, 1097, the Seljuk garrison rushed out to meet Tancred in open battle, but they were easily beaten back. The Norman then taunted the enemy, claiming that he was merely the vanguard of a massive Christian force. The following morning, he received their surrender and raised his banner on the citadel. That same day, Baldwin arrived and feasted beneath the city walls alongside the Normans. Despite being absent from any engagements, he suggested that they were to share the spoils equally, and since he had the larger force, Tancred had to begrudgingly accept. His banner was replaced and thrown into a nearby marsh. Within hours, he gathered his troops and rode east. A month later, at dusk, a force of 300 southern Italian Normans arrived in order to reinforce Tancred, but were refused entry into Tarsus, forcing them to make camp under the walls.
So much infighting.
Unseen, the bulk of the Seljuk garrison slipped through the night and butchered them as they slept, before riding off into the distance. A rumor began circulating that Baldwin was actually responsible, and fearing for his life, he locked himself in a tower waiting for the storm to pass, before installing his own garrison and leaving a week later. But the bloody stain would never be forgotten. Meanwhile, Tancred had made it to Mamistra, where he was warmly welcomed by the local Armenians, who accepted him as their new ruler after the Seljuk garrison fled. Like clockwork, Baldwin arrived a few days later and camped near the city, but this time Tancred would not back down. The First Crusader confrontation was brief and more of a brawl than a battle. Some men were seriously injured, but no one was killed, and both sides made peace the next day.
Insane though when they got killed there.
Before going on their separate ways. Tancred garrisoned Mamistra with 50 men, secured the port of Alexandretta, and met up with the main crusading host on its way to Antioch after establishing friendly relations and a stable base in Armenian Cilicia.
I mean, it's good that I guess that they kind of like conquered that area. It's so weird though, like the infighting though. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Each person's trying to assert their own glory amongst the Crusaders. They're pretty much all in competition with each other, but they're not understanding that teamwork makes the dream work.
As for Baldwin, his adventure was just beginning. While the rest of the Crusaders prepared to head south, he was guided by an Armenian named Bagrat, who promised great riches and fertile lands to the east. Accompanied by just 100 knights, he took a page from Tancred's book, and was able to capture the towns of Tel Bashir and Ravindel with little more than a bluff. Initially, he rewarded Bagrat with lordship over the latter city, but before long a plot was uncovered, and Baldwin hunted him down and brutally tortured him. News of these conquests soon spread, reaching the ear of Thoros, the Armenian ruler of Edessa, who was barely holding on to power. The two men formed an alliance, formalized in a bizarre ritual, during which both men—
This is so weird that it's just all happening at the same time.
stripped to their waist and embraced each other under a long shirt, sealing a union between father and adopted son.
Okay.
With his newfound Latin son, Thoros dispatched Baldwin at the head of an Armenian force to deal with his Seljuk rival from Samosata. On his return to Edessa, the Crusader uncovered a plot by Edessene nobles aiming to assassinate Thoros. Baldwin neither aided nor turned them in, hoping to see where the wind blows, and in—
See, like, it's so, like, it's like that show, what's that show called? Not, it's the show with, dang, it's slipping me, but it's like House of Cards. There's so many like people that you're stabbing in the back, but there's also like friends, and are they your friends? They're friends for today. It's so weird, man, but it makes sense. This is such a volatile state.
In March 1098, the locals rebelled against their ruler and ripped him to pieces. Baldwin immediately jumped on the opportunity and established an iron grip over the city, which would become the base of the future County of Edessa, the first Crusader state, carved out with just 100 men and questionable morality.
Yeah, questionable. Yeah.
Meanwhile, the main body of the Crusader army took Mirash on October 10th of 1097 and prepared to attack Antioch. At its peak, it was the third city of the Roman Empire.
You would think that Ducas, like, I forgot his first name, but Ducas, like the guy that was like helping on the navy side and throughout southwest Anatolia, would like pace with these people towards Antioch, because, you know, if this is a true siege, if they can like surround the city and also make sure that there's no naval supply, they will easily take it.
But its role in the region was now diminished due to the rise of neighboring Aleppo and Damascus. The Latins could have taken Jerusalem without it, but if they wanted to keep it, they needed this strategic target, which had immense value to all Christians. Luckily for them, those same cities were now fighting for dominance, while Antioch stood alone in the backdrop of the fragmented Seljuk Empire. Ruled by its ambitious and very capable Turkoman named Yaghisian, who struggled to preserve his domain amidst civil war, pockets of Shiite Arabs, numerous Christian subjects, and now an impending zealous army with quite the reputation.
Very.
But now, let's look at what he had going for him. A very capable Seljuk garrison of 5,000 men alongside 800 soldiers, incredibly well-built walls, 20 meters high and
Yeah, I don't think that Navy will do much. I take all that back. This is not anywhere near the water. Got the St. Paul's, St. George's Gate, and then you got a few other gates, and then the Citadel. Interestingly enough, there's a gate right next to the Citadel, but it's not as easy to traverse that area.
2 meters thick, covering a large area, including a hill featuring a formidable citadel 500 meters above the city, from which the defenders could track every Frankish move. There were foothills which could be turned into farmland, but above all, the geography made this city nearly impossible to take. The city was protected by a mountain to the east, while the Orontes River flowed in a way that if an army wanted to surround Antioch, it had to cross it, separating the camp in 3 on its west and south side.
True.
In mid-October, the leaders of the Crusade gathered together to discuss how they would tackle this challenge. Tatikius came forward and proposed.
By the way, no one's going to agree. I already know that these egos, they're going to be like 3 or 4 different directions, at least two different directions they're going to want to take.
That they fortify themselves to the north and harass the garrison from afar, a long and drawn-out strategy that worked in 969 during the Byzantine Reconquista of the Macedonian dynasty period. But the majority decided on a more direct approach. Raymond of Toulouse was convinced that if the Crusaders took too long, many would desert during the winter, something which had already started to occur during the difficult trek in the mountains. Satellite fortresses were captured, with contingents securing Bagras, Arta, and the Iron Bridge, opening the road to the coveted city. But once the Crusaders met the imposing defences high above them, all hopes of a direct assault dissipated. 30,000 Latins, half of which were non-combatants, made camp against just 3 of the 6 main gates on the 20th of October, centred around the northwestern corner. Bohemond took up position in front of the St. Paul Gate, while the remaining Italian Normans, led by Tancred, camped behind. The northern French blockaded the Dog Gate, Godfrey of Bouillon held the Gate of the Duke, and the Byzantine contingent acted as reserves. Siege warfare was a staple of medieval European warfare, which also came with certain traditions. Namely, the first banner to fly above the walls of a newly conquered city represented a strong claim to it.
Yeah, that's what we saw. They're competing on the Sicilian Armenian side.
And it is here that we find that Bohemond was starting to show some of his ambition, being the first to arrive and
I think Baldwin has the most ambition so far,
positioning his forces against the most crucial gate of the 3. In the first 2 weeks, both sides were sizing each other up, which resulted in the calmest period, during which Yagisiyan sent out his sons to search for aid, and the Crusaders enjoyed plentiful supplies from the rich valley. Fearing mutiny, the Seljuks expelled a large portion of its Christian population, while many Armenians took the chance to visit the Crusader camp and report back to Yagisiyan what they saw. Suddenly, this army that took down the Sultanate of Rum didn't seem so threatening, and the strategy changed entirely. Arrows were shot from atop the citadel, while mounted archers sallied out and harassed the camp, racing back across the bridge when given chase. Harim, a nearby fortress, was still in Muslim hands and was used as a base from which raids were continuously launched. By mid-November, the winter cold was setting in, supplies were waning, and heavy rains poured on the Christian force. The Crusaders were putting barely any pressure on the city, while the city continued to receive rich caravans from the south.
Yeah, this isn't a siege. This isn't a siege. I mean, you could call it a siege, but it's not effective at all.
In order to turn the tide, the Latins built a bridge over the Orontes River by tying small boats together, which was difficult to cross.
Pontoon bridge.
The maneuver allowed the Crusaders access to the sea via the crucial port of St. Simeon, which received regular shipments of supplies from Byzantine Cyprus. This entry point allowed the Franks to send and receive letters from the west, resulting in a rare collaboration between Bishop Adhemar and the exiled Patriarch of Jerusalem, who drafted a letter asking the West to send a new wave of reinforcements to the Holy Land. On the 17th of November, 13 Genoese ships even made it to the port, bringing vital craftsmen and materials, which were used to build a fort on the slopes of Mount Storin called Malregard.
What's his name? Adamar is low key like the MVP so far.
Which were used to build a fort on the slopes of Mount Storin called Melregard. Next, Burmar was chosen to deal with Harim, which he did by employing steppe tactics, namely a feigned retreat. This drew out the small
Where did he learn that from?
garrison, which was then smashed by a heavy cavalry charge, personally led by Burmar. The fortress didn't fall, but its garrison was neutralized. According to eyewitness reports from the Crusader camp, those whom we captured were led before the city gate and were beheaded to grieve the Turks who were in the city. The garrison immediately responded in kind, according to the same report. Alas, how many Christians, Greeks, Syrians and Armenians who lived in the city were killed by the maddened Turks?
Yeah, that doesn't really help y'all's case as Crusaders. You guys are basically not saving your own people at that point.
With the Franks looking on, they threw outside the walls the heads of those killed with their catapults and slings. This especially grieved our people. The Greek Christian Patriarch of Antioch was regularly suspended from the walls upside down, while the guards beat his feet with iron rods. Both sides were determined to win, no matter the cost. With the coming of December, the shipments became infrequent and hunger began to set in. Foraging parties ventured far from the camp, and many were picked off, never to be seen again. Merchants from Cilicia became one of the few lifelines for many, but greed and the dangers of making the journey led the traders to jack up their prices, which caused mass desertion amongst the poor.
Dang.
Those who could not afford to feed themselves were losing health, which led to the rapid spread of disease, causing the death of a fifth of the army.
And that's just going to make you weaker than you were. Oh, it's just not a good situation at all for them.
After celebrating a grim Christmas, Burmar and Robert of Flanders left camp on a mission to find supplies, taking 400 knights and at least as many infantry with them east. The expedition did manage to find a significant amount of forage in the fertile area of Jabal as-Samak, raiding nearby villages. While camping near the town of Al-Bara, the group made one of the worst strategic mistakes one can make. They didn't post scouts, and suddenly realized that a 10,000-strong army was on the horizon. The combined force of Damascus and Homs, led by the formidable Atabeg Tugtegin, was equally surprised to find the raiding party on the 31st of December after they answered Antioch's call for aid.
Oh no, they're in trouble.
Robert instantly rallied his knights and charged against the overwhelming force, stopping the Muslim force.
400 against 10,000?
Burmar stayed back, pouncing at the right moment as the enemy was trying to flank his ally. Rather than risk failure for themselves and the entire crusade, the men retreated back into camp, abandoning all of the supplies they had managed to gather, as well as those who were on foot. Wow. Such was the lack of war steeds that most of the cavalry chased after a single horse, who had lost his rider and galloped west. When the dust settled, the troops from Damascus regrouped and attacked the fleeing footmen, killing or capturing most of them. The blow inflicted by the Crusader force was not fatal, but it did discourage the already disinterested Muslim troops from continuing their expedition, so they headed back to Damascus. Over the next few days, Robert returned to pick up a few stragglers and supplies, but overall, despite preventing utter disaster, the mission failed to resupply the camp. But Burmar and Robert's absence didn't go unnoticed.
Yeah, and I'm guessing they probably tried to raid them a few times with less troops to defend.
The all-seeing Citadel reported the troop movement to Yagi Siyan, who ordered the garrison to sally out and attack the Crusader camp. To make matters worse, Robert of Normandy was absent, visiting a nearby port, and Godfrey was ill. Rushing out of the bridge gate, the Seljuks charged at the Provençal camp, where they met Raymond of Toulouse. After a quick engagement, the garrison force began to flee, as the southern French gave chase. Upon approaching the bridge gate, more enemies from both sides emerged, turning the attack into a rout. men snatched riders from their saddles and pulled at their horses' tails, killing 15 knights and 20 footmen. Amidst the chaos, the bannerman of Bishop Adhemar, the spiritual leader of the crusade selected by Pope Urban himself, was slain. The next day, the prized banner was flown atop the wall of Antioch, taunting the besiegers, who saw the flag depicting the Virgin Mary and felt like a legion who had lost its eagle.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, by the way. So they're kind of screwed at this point. They need some sort of lifeline to help them. They need something to happen because it's not going in the direction at all.
The turn of the year signaled the lowest point of the crusade. After crossing thousands of kilometers and enduring countless attacks and terrible
Where's Baldwin? That's what I would be asking.
Weather, the Crusaders were nearing their breaking point. An eyewitness reports, at that time, the famished ate the shoots of bean seeds growing in the fields, and many kinds of herbs unseasoned with salt, also thistles, which, being not well cooked because of the deficiency of firewood, pricked the tongues of those eating them. Also horses, asses, camels, dogs, and rats. The poorer ones even ate the skins of the beasts and the seeds of grain found in manure.
God.
Simultaneously, the men witnessed a comet and aurora, felt an earthquake, and interpreted the signs as God's displeasure.
Always gonna have something.
It was at this crucial point when the clergy stepped up and decided to restore the faith by blaming it all on the sins of those involved. We believed that these misfortunes befell the Franks and that they were not able for so long a time to take the city because of their sins. Not only dissipation, but also avarice or pride or rapaciousness corrupted them. Bishop Adhemar took measures into his own hands and began advocating that all women should be expelled from the camp and the rest should fast for 3 days and form a procession around the city's walls.
No, eat! Bro, they need their strength. Alright, Adhemar, I was rooting for you, but now you going crazy.
Theft and fornication were forbidden, and anyone who broke the rules
They just don't want nobody else because he doesn't have a woman, probably.
was publicly punished. Around this time, a man and woman were caught in the act of adultery before being stripped and whipped for the whole army to see.
I get discipline's interesting, but like the food thing's too far, guys.
These measures generally had a positive effect in restoring morale and discipline to the camp, but there were still some who deserted the cause, including none other than Peter the Hermit, who was caught trying to leave during the night. But by far the most
I'm not a big Peter the Hermit fan, so that's kind of funny.
impactful departure was that of Byzantine general Tatikius. Seeing the conditions reach an all-time low, the man who acted as quartermaster and representative of Alexios pledged to sail to Constantinople and come back with ships full of supplies. To make a strong statement, he even left all of his belongings in the camp. But for reasons which will become clear later, the shipments arrived, but the general did not. Writing with the benefit of hindsight, every Frankish chronicler will condemn both the emperor and his general, and many of their reports failed to mention these dozens of shipments, which allowed the siege to even reach this point.
So they had their own like personal vendetta against him because he didn't stay. He abandoned ship, probably, in their eyes.
It was now late January of 1098, and Bohemond himself threatened to leave the campaign, stating that he lacked the funds to pay for his soldiers, which led to creating a common war chest, sponsored by Raymond, aimed at financing the purchase and maintenance of mounts. To ensure the army's cohesion, all Crusader leaders pledged to stay in the camp for 7 years, or until Antioch was taken.
7 years? These guys have gone insane. But I understand their passion and I understand what they're going for. That's crazy to me.
The garrison never stopped harassing the Crusaders, and during one of the many skirmishes, a glimmer of hope was born, as a high-ranking Seljuk nobleman was captured. After learning that his family commanded one of the towers, the Latins negotiated secret access to their tower as ransom,
Oh my.
but Yaki uncovered the plot and relieved the family from their command. The Crusaders began torturing their high-profile prisoner, but to no avail.
Dang.
Just when things couldn't get any worse, the first days of February brought the news that a new army was approaching Antioch from the east. Ridwan of Aleppo gathered 12,000 men in order to lift the siege and gave the council an impossible task. The answer was in the form of 700 knights, riding the last healthy steeds the Crusaders could muster under the command of Bohemond.
You gotta meet him at the Iron Bridge, otherwise can't bottleneck him.
This was a big step, taken under desperation and based on his previous successes. With no infantry to slow him down, the Norman set out and hid his men behind a hill near the Iron Bridge, separating his force into 6 squadrons. From there, the Latins waited for the long column moving in from Aleppo. On the morning of February 9th, Ridwan was marching down the road with 2 detachments as a vanguard away from his main force. Bohemond could have easily held a defensive position at the bridge, but instead he sprung his ambush, ordering 5 of his squadrons to charge directly at the column, while he held back. One eyewitness described these first minutes of battle. The din of battle arose to heaven, for all were fighting at once, and the storm of missiles darkened the sky. Knowing that they were heavily outnumbered, these knights must have been terrified, but they played a crucial tactical role. Their shock attack drew Ridwan's main force forward into the heart of the battle. His massed troops now began to push the Crusaders back, and the Aleppans most likely felt that victory was at hand. In fact, this was the moment for which Bohemond had prepared.
I'm confused what they're going for here.
The author of the Gesta Francorum, who was amongst Bohemond's troops, wrote an impassioned description of this attack. So Bohemond, protected on all sides by the sign of the cross, charged the Turkish forces like a lion which has been starving for 3 or 4 days, which comes roaring out of its cave thirsting for the blood of cattle. His attack was so fierce that the points of his banner were flying right over the heads of the Turks. The other troops, seeing Bohemond's banner carried ahead so honourably, stopped the retreat at once, and all our men in a body charged the Turks, who were amazed and took flight. Our men pursued them and massacred them right up to the Iron Bridge.
Okay.
The Norman bet the fate of the entire expedition on this brilliant move, and as the fleeing head of the enemy column started to trample those behind them, the knights who followed him recognized his genius. The garrison, having seen Bohemond leave camp once again, attempted a counterattack, but once again they were repelled. With the battle and booty won, we carried the heads of the slain to camp and stuck them on posts as grim reminders of the plight of their Turkish allies and of future woes of the besieged. Back at the camp.
Alright, that's what we'll stop right there. Next will be the Battle of Antioch, the biggest battle of the First Crusade. This episode really was more about the siege, the expeditions, everything in between. Interesting, this is like the biggest moment so far of the entire crusade, and we'll see where it takes us from here. I appreciate you guys so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Make sure you hit that like button and that subscribe button if you haven't already. Peace out. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.